Minister, a person that is a confidant, a mentor, a person that can be trusted because of their honorable position in the community. What happens when the minister is a wolf in sheep's clothing? Let's talk about the elephant in the room, on the cases that have been made public and those who haven't. The ministers and minors.
What happens when a trustworthy person in leadership positions get these roles? Do you think that it's like a means of healing themselves in the battle that they're dealing with, and will secretly only to end up hurting those who are really they're supposed to be helping? Tiffany, thank you so much for joining here. And we also have our other host,
Melissa.
What can you tell us about why you're here today, and what do you know about ministers who prey on the innocent?
Well, I'm here certainly because certainly I have children, and I've been born and raised in church all of my life. So I've seen so many different things being in the church. And so certainly I know that it is something that happens. And unfortunately, we don't always hear about it. We're hearing about it more in the recent years, but we haven't always heard about it because we have this thing in church where I have seen this code of silence. Like, even if it's happening in our local church, you don't want anyone else outside of the church to know about it, because then it seems to cast some kind of dispersion on the church, where some people already have a negative connotation about church anyway. And so when you have things like that that's going on and taking place in the church, instead of protecting the youth and protecting our minors, we tend to protect the ministry and the minister. Mm-hmm. And so therefore it continues to go on, because sometimes we don't even check the man of God. We may say something to him, maybe, and then we have this thing where prayer answers everything. And prayer is certainly very important. It has its role, it's vital. It does do some things. But when you have somebody who is dealing with that inner demon, that's what I call it, or inner sickness, and like any other sickness, it needs to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. They need to be healed, and not sometimes just by laying on of hands. Sometimes you need professional help. But there's this code of silence and this thing of where if you're a man of God, then you're higher than anybody else. So now we have to have a certain way to approach them. And all the time when we're doing this and we have these conversations, that child is being molested. That child is being abused. That child is going through things, and we tend to put them on the back burner. Mm-hmm. And sometimes even make them think, did it really happen? Yeah. Did it really happen? Because we certainly don't want to accuse a man or woman of God. Mm-hmm. and be wrong. And your child can clearly tell you, here's what happened. Mm-hmm. And we want to are you sure? That's Minister so-and-so. That's Pastor so-and-so. We just can't say these things if it's not true. Did you misunderstand? Did you somehow or another maybe didn't understand what he was actually doing? Could you have misunderstood that somehow? Mm-hmm. And that's and unfortunately, that's where we have gotten sometimes as parents. When it came to men and women of the cloth, we'll take that approach with them. Now, you let somebody say that in a supermarket somewhere. Let us be in Walmart and they say someone touched them. We immediately, we're going to respond to that. We're going to act on that. But when it comes to the church, we handle it very differently.
And I find that interesting that you said that, Tiffany. Thank you so much again for voicing your opinion. And thank you so much, qualified to be on this show so you can share with us these instances. It's funny that you mentioned, because I'm noticing a lot of commercials on television about the Boy Scout leaders, and they have been molesting the children all these years, and now they have a support system to where they can go ahead and sue and get help. Do you think that's something that a part of the church can go ahead and stop being so silent about it when it comes to ministers?
Well, we have to stop being silent about it. Because if we continue to be silent, it's going to continue to happen. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to take place over and over again, as we've seen. Look in the Catholic Church. Again, it happens more often than not. A lot of times in our Black churches, in our holiness churches, which is what I grew up in, the holiness church. Again, this code of silence, and until we stop being silent about not just that, anything, it's a cycle of abuse. Yeah. And when I say cycle, it's continuing. And even if that pastor or that minister leaves that particular assembly, they'll just go somewhere else. and do it all over again. Because while we are praying, Praying, they are praying, Preying. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they know how to look out there. Nothing wrong with certain parents, but they'll look out in the audience and begin to pray on, maybe a single mother raising their children, maybe a mother who's having financial difficulties. And then you attach themselves to them thinking, well, there's no father figure. Maybe I can come in and help you out as a father figure. And it turns into something more valuable because we don't do our due diligence to know the background, where you come from, what your motives are, because you come as a man of the cloth. Yeah. And we hold them in high regards. But they're men first.
Yes, exactly. You know, Tiffany, you brought up something very interesting, and I'm sitting here just listening to you and Jackie, what y'all were just saying. Tiffany, if you can just tell us a little bit, real briefly, about you said your background and your experience, and then I have a follow-up question once you kind of just give us a layout about you briefly.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm again Tiffany Andrews. I'm an elder in the Lord's Church. Grew up in Washington D.C. In the Pentecostal churches, Bible Way Church of America. I'm a social worker. My degree's in social work. I'm married, recently separated, with 2 children. My daughter is 17. My son is now 13. Okay. Like I said, and having grown up in the churches all of my life, that's all I've known. Going back and forth to church, I've seen a lot of things happen, not realizing it initially, but as I've gotten older, and even by my degree in social work, I'm able to now pick in on cues and clues that's been missed by certain things. So I've seen a lot. I was even, by personal testimony, I was molested at a, not necessarily by a minister, but it was at a church conference. It was a convocation. And again, because that atmosphere, because we say church, and it's all people who's supposed to be saved, we're more lenient on babysitters, or more lenient on, how we watch our children. We feel, well, this is a safe environment. So what my mother and father typically wouldn't do anywhere else, because it's a church environment and convocation, that eye is not always there. Yeah. So someone was able to, older gentleman was able to seek me out because I was by myself at 11 years old, and then things happen. Okay.
So let me just ask you this. Now, children, they look up to leadership. They look up to leadership for guidance, and they look at them because they see that they're really making a difference in the community, their children, just overall. But how can children become more knowledgeable when they are approached with situations like this?
Well, I oftentimes say, ministry begins at home first. So the first thing we need to do is teach our children in the home. That's what we can do outside of the church. Let them know bad touch, good touch. We learn in school, sometimes they learn in school, but everything begins at home. Education, ministry, training, teaching in the home, because sometimes you won't hear that anywhere else. Another thing the church, though, can do is stop letting it be so taboo. Yeah. The same way we have classes on single women, married women, ministries, youth fellowships, that needs to be a subject. Someone needs to get someone to come in and just have a class. Get someone to come in and have a seminar, some kind of session to teach our children that these things are happening. They're real. They are happening, and they have happened, and will continue to happen if we don't say anything about it. So they need to have an atmosphere where they feel free enough to do it.
Apologize on everybody's behalf for not helping you when you were 11. So thank you again. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I'm guessing that you had help, but that was my next question. Should persons who harm minors be treated with psychological help, or should they be prosecuted by the prison system, or both?
I'm really going to say both. I'm going to say both. And I say that because it's still a crime. And you're gonna have to be dealt with the same way I would say if they're not in the church. You know what I mean? I don't want the title minister or pastor to then carry a certain weight. Well, since you're a pastor, let's just go through counseling. You know what I mean? And like I said, I think, and unfortunately, sometimes when you go to prison, it's no rehabilitation. But however, when you come out, or you're dealing with an organization, if that organization, who put you up in that position, they should also be responsible enough to say, well, let's put some help in there as well. because that person who did it may not seek that help out. It needs to be, but is it a requirement from the law? No, they're going to put you in jail. But when you're of age and you're a grown man or grown woman, you know better. So there are consequences to your actions. And you can always get into counseling. Counseling is only good as much as you're going to disclose. So if you go in there and you say, well, you know, I know what I did was wrong. I realized it was wrong. I prayed about it. I feel like I'm delivered now. I'm cured. So the counselor may say, okay, my job is done. You can always fool the counselor because you're only as good as what you disclose. And that's my take. I believe both. Because if you come out, absolutely, if you just come out with just the counsel, you're probably going to do it again.
Yeah.
As Dr. Phil McGraw, he likes to be coined as, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And so I'm just wondering if victims can heal from being preyed. How you yourself, that's why you're here, one of the reasons why you're here.
Absolutely.
What was the process of you healing yourself from the age 11?
Age 11. I'm going to be very transparent about that. Because God bless my mother and father, God rest their souls. Because of the church mindset, the church nature, and not necessarily being completely educated about it. It was like, okay, I'm going to get her, we're going to talk to her. There was a lot of talking, a lot of praying, and there was some help. But at 11 years old, I'm like, okay, I'm getting help. I don't necessarily want to go see this woman every week, every 2 weeks. So I was resistant to that, although I knew I had some things going on. I was 11. And so as a result, because I didn't get the kind of help I think I should have gotten then, my mother and father did the best they could. It led me to a different kind of life. You know, as I grew up with low self-esteem. I eventually became promiscuous. Because I'm like, I'm not going to say no again and then have someone mistreat me. I'm not going to say no. So it led to that. It wasn't until I became, got much older in my adult years that I sought out the counseling that I know I should have gotten then. But I couldn't, not the age I was. And my parents weren't necessarily forcing it. They knew it was wrong, but it wasn't necessarily forced. You know what I mean? They like, okay, if she doesn't want to go, okay, she seems to be doing okay. And maybe for a little while, I did seem like I was doing okay. And I suffered silently quite a bit. There was a suicide attempt. You know, I had, thank God, it didn't work. So I'm here to tell my story today. But again, it wasn't until I became of a certain age and I got tired of things I was doing. And I realized I have to deal with that young girl because that 11-year-old wasn't going to let me be great. That's what happens. That 11-year-old girl, I can only go but so far. And at some point, that 11-year-old girl will show right back up. Yeah. And I had to deal with the 11-year-old because she was like, you're not going to go on to be successful and not deal with me. You know, and so I had to go deal with that 11-year-old. And it was just about, and amazingly, I did seek out counseling, not only traditional counseling, but I also sought out spiritual counseling. So just dealing with both of those. And of course, because of that, I'm certainly more diligent in talking to my children about, and anybody else who will listen. I'm constantly talking about it to whoever will listen. Like this, again, not because the people who did it to me were ministers, but because it happened in a church setting. Yeah. That almost becomes a code of, okay, well, let's handle it within the church, in the church realm. We don't want to cast aspersions upon the organization in which it happened. So it was still some, let's protect the name, the church. And now looking back on it as an 11-year-old, you know, looking back on that, I'm like, wow, you know, it was important to forget the name of the church. You know, at that point, forget the church. Let's deal with me. Yeah.
See, so it seems like leadership is more political than really paying attention to who is supporting organizations, whether it be church and organization. So it just seems like everything is just not dealt with as in an appropriate time.
Absolutely not. Then I'm praying that there's some places that's doing a better job now. But to be completely honest, from what I see, not everyone is doing it. I believe it's happening, but it's not happening to the degree in which it should be. Again, we need more times like these, more times like, let's get into the real level. We say we want to be real and transparent, but still we're protecting these people. We're protecting a brand, so to speak. Right. Yeah. We're protecting a business because we don't want to, again, you have so many people who already don't have good thoughts about the church. Mm-hmm. You know, some people who read, and you think that if they hear this, it'll just support. See, that's why I don't go to church. See, that's why I don't go to church. We need to tell the truth. Yeah. But like the Bible says, the truth will make you free. Mm-hmm. It needs to be told true. And there's a difference between the church and your relationship with Christ anyway. So that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. You know what I mean? But within our local churches, classes need to be held. Seminars need to be held. People need to come in to talk about this very thing. Because while they're thinking about having the classes, some child is being molested. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Some child is being abused, and they're waiting for someone to recognize it. See me. I'm going through things. See me. Mm-hmm. You know, my promiscuity was a sign. Mm-hmm. You know, my suicide attempt. These are things happening. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, my lack of self-esteem, you know, was an issue. Yeah. And a lot of times I don't think they go ignored, but they go without being dealt with like they should.
Yes. So. Yes. And I think that is the key point of it's just being overlooked. The churches, and this is not to discredit like you said, the church. It's sure. Just it's certain individuals in the church.
Absolutely.
Pulling people's mindset, like, or pushing people away, saying, you know, no, I'm not going to church because sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so did this, or I heard, or whatever. So that's why I'm saying there has to be some type of transparency that goes on between or some type of just acknowledgement to say, hey, this is going on, you know, and it's not even just the church. There are people at home that are dealing with
absolutely
abuse and neglect or any type of form. There has to be some support system in these situations, because this is not, like I said, not to downgrade the church. This is just what's going on in our everyday lives that are and people run to church for that hope, that support, that guidance, that direction. And then some people just run to their loved ones or family, but then it gets turned around and then it just spirals down, and situations like you said, when you were at 11, but if you didn't allow it to take you allowed it to, you overcame it.
Absolutely.
A personal relationship with God is the number one key in Absolutely. Situations like this, when you can overcome and you know you are better than that. You're not going to tear you down. You're not going to make you feel less than. And I think with that being said, that is a key piece that a lot of ministers, they'll get on the platform, or leaders, or just in any perspective, any realm, will come in and say, you know, we're here for you. We'll pray for you. But sometimes it's more than that. Some people
absolutely
to just need that support and say, what can we do? How can we overcome this? We have the resources. It's not like we have the resources. We have the resources. But are we utilizing them to the best of it? Or is it going to be just, okay, let's deal with it just now at this moment, and then it'll go away and then it won't come back? No, because that member is still in the church. That pastor is still in the church. So how, you know what I mean? So how do you overcome? Because I look at it in an organizational standpoint, and businesses, you know, any type of form of sexual interaction or conduct or thing like that, you're getting any type of suspension or fired or anything. There's no tolerance. There's no tolerance in that. So why is it no tolerance in the business corporate world, but in the church, it's kind of like, oh, well, you know, we're going to just brush it over and we're going to leave it. But like I said, corporate, there's no tolerance.
Absolutely. Schools,
all of that stuff. It's completely no tolerance. You have to sign documentations. You have to look at videos in corporations. You know, if you see any behavior or act, or if you're an employer or if you're an employee, your supervisor, they have all of these platforms to let you know if this happens, that's it. So that's
why I think that a lot of people who have psychological problems, they know this. They know what you're saying, Melissa. And this is why they join church organizations, because they can be protected and they can go ahead and easily prey on the innocent.
Absolutely.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what do we do with that? I think everybody has said it in an eloquent way. Go ahead and acknowledge it. Talk to somebody, seek help. There is a higher power. You know, when I say higher power, meaning your spiritual relationship, your personal relationship with God, people that you trust, get the help that you can seek, and go ahead and follow through. Help somebody else. And like I said, this is why Melissa and I are here, because we felt the need to have a platform for this acknowledgement. And so we can seek help. What kind of advice would you give, Tiffany, for the audience who are listening, who may be experiencing something like this, or may know someone who experienced something like this? What type of advice would you give them?
First of all, if you see something, say something. Immediately begin to talk about it. Say something to someone. Let's say if you know a mother who you see that this child is dealing with some things, have that conversation. Don't be afraid to approach that mom and have that conversation. It is a must. And see, sometimes God will allow you to see something for a reason. So we have to trust that and say, okay, Lord, you're not showing me this just to show me. Don't just pray about it. The Bible says faith without works is dead. So you have faith, you know what you're saying. Talk to that mother. Have that mother to talk to those children. And it's up to the mother what she does with that information. But it's up to us, even if we see it in the church, go to someone, say something. We can't have these feelings or this idea of what we're thinking we're saying. Something's happening. And even if you're wrong, I'd rather be wrong and say something than not say anything at all. And you know what I'm saying? And what's happening to that child that's going on. So like I said, we have this idea that the people in the church are higher, or we don't want to be wrong about the minister or the man and woman of God, but that's okay, because you know what, they're human too. So what I'm saying is, if I go into a place and I see a young child and they're acting a certain way, acting funny, I might say something to the mom, hey, is everything okay? Hey, here's some things you might want to look at. And especially what people love from me sometimes is when I say, here's what happened to me. I'm not afraid to tell my story. And so I'm just letting you know that, because I'm seeing some things that I myself dealt with. It don't have to be this, but we don't know. So have a conversation. And we can't be afraid to speak out. We cannot be afraid to get in this atmosphere. This code of silence has to cease immediately. There cannot be a code of silence anymore. Because as long as we're silent, people are being abused, people are being molested, all kinds of things are going on because we decided we're not going to say anything because we don't want to be wrong. Let me be wrong. I'd rather be wrong and you have an issue with me than to be right and your child is being hurt. So we just need to speak on it, say something. And if you don't feel like you can say something, go to a professional. There's some places that's free, you know, and ask them, hey, how can I say something to my son or my daughter? Give me some tools in which some words I can use. So there's some certain words you use, some tools you can use to how to approach your children. Because sometimes you approach them the wrong way, they're going to shut down.
Yes.
That's a given. They're going to shut down.
Yes.
So once you realize a way in which you can talk and some things you can say, open up that child and go in a loving way. Don't go accusatory. Did you say such and such? You know, you better make sure you're sure. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, kids will tell and then they're shut down by the parents. Because that's another issue. I know you didn't ask me that, but it's so much wrapped up into this.
No, and you need to speak on it. Speak on it. Because there are going to be people will say, well, you know, I really need that pastor because that pastor helped me through. And
that church helped me out. That church helped me through when I didn't have a job. That church was there when we didn't have food. That church fed us. That minister, I mean, he bought clothes. He's been good to this family. You know, let's make sure we're not accusing them of something they didn't do. Did you misunderstand what they were saying? You know, are you sure he put his hand there? Could that have been you? Did you dream it? You know, all that kind of stuff goes on, which is unfortunate because after a while, that child's beginning to feel like, when my obligation to my mom, maybe I shouldn't say anything. And that's all that minister needs, is to know that child is never going to be silent. He's going to have a field day. Because we didn't step in and start saying something immediately. If Minister Jax is wrong, let Minister Jack listen. I see something going on with my child. You know, well, number one, let me go back. Your child shouldn't be alone with that minister. You know, that's not, especially if you're not a family member. Even family members do it, but we're talking about the church. he shouldn't have the opportunity to be alone with that child. That's one thing parents can do differently. Mm-hmm. You know, stop trusting these men and women of God just because of the title that they carry. Mm-hmm. Because if they're, before they get into the church, they're men and women. Before the God is in there, they're men and women. They have the same issues as everybody else. Just because they go to church doesn't that negate them from having the same issues that people go through. If it's a sickness, it's a sickness. Mm-hmm. The church sometimes is just a breeding ground for folks who know here's easy access, especially if I go and help the mom. If there's no dad around, I'm going to go. They prey on people. Mm-hmm. So when you get them that access, then they begin to feel like, okay, I can get in this way. Mm-hmm. And certainly she's not going to tell on me because she needs me. Mm-hmm. First of all, we don't need to put ourselves in that position to let somebody have that kind of access to our children.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And when that child does come home, ask questions. As parents, we need to ask these questions. If they go away for a camp with the church, the whole church can go. When they come home, ask questions. Mm-hmm. You know, how did this go? What y'all do this night? Without trying to make them feel like they've done something wrong, of course. Just natural conversations.
Yes.
We must have those conversations. It needs to be had. And as far as the church, even when before you become a minister, that needs to be put somewhere in the because we make these statements that we're going to do this, we're going to do this for the church, we're going to make sure we preach this, that, and the other. That needs to be in there. Mm-hmm. Here's some things you don't do as a minister. Here's some things that we're not going to tolerate. Sign it. Sign these contracts. Here's some things we're putting in place as a church just to protect our kids, protect our women, protect our men. Put some things of protection in place. Mm-hmm. We can't do too much. Let me say that. There's nothing that we can do that's too much when it comes to protecting our children.
No. Mm-mm. No, it's not.
Thank you so much, Miss Tiffany. And you have helped a great deal of our audience today. Many of us are dealing with this or know someone. We appreciate your presence here. And I would love for you to come back on another topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, audience, we have some information that you can have help as a reference to if you know someone that has been molested in an organization. We have some information for you at the end of this show. Again, thank you so much for watching The Big E, the elephant in the room, where we speak about the unspeakable.